to order. Welcome all, and in particular to our witnesses. Before we begin, I want to take a moment to acknowledge your courage in testifying here today. I appreciate, the committee appreciates, the Senate appreciates, the state and the nation appreciate what it takes for you to be here, addressing deeply challenging and personal subjects in a public forum like this. I want to advise those in attendance and those tuned in online that this subject matter is sensitive and troubling, and listener and viewer discretion are advised. In February of this year, as chair of the Human Rights Subcommittee, I launched an investigation into state prison and jail conditions for pregnant and postpartum women. This is the second public hearing the subcommittee is holding regarding this investigation, during which the subcommittee has conducted site visits and interviewed more than 100 formerly and currently incarcerated women, civil rights and criminal defense attorneys, medical providers, advocates, doulas, and academics. Our staff also reviewed federal lawsuits and relevant public reports from the last 6 years, finding what I believe to be significant and pervasive abuse and mistreatment of pregnant and postpartum women behind bars. To date, the subcommittee has identified more than 200 reported human rights abuses against pregnant and postpartum women at state prisons and jails nationwide. We've heard from mothers forced to give birth in prison showers, hallways, or on filthy cell floors. Mothers who gave birth into toilets after being told they were in labor, then told they were not in labor, then told to, quote, lie down and go back to their cells. Mothers who gave birth in their underwear after prison staff refused to help them and told them instead, quote, don't have that baby, and, quote, you're not even pregnant. In all such cases reviewed, these women repeatedly requested and even begged for help. But help came too late, if help came at all. And in several cases, including one we'll hear today, children did not survive. We heard from mothers whose infants were immediately taken away from them. The subcommittee received numerous reports that generally infants born in a facility are taken from their mothers within a day or just hours of being born, and many mothers went months and sometimes even years without knowing what happened to their babies. We heard from postpartum mothers who were placed in solitary confinement within days of giving birth, without adequate medical care or mental health support. We've heard from women who were shackled around their stomachs, wrists, and feet during pregnancy and birth, reportedly causing injuries and miscarriages. The human rights of women to humane prison conditions and adequate health care, and the human rights of pregnant women to humane prison conditions and adequate health care are recognized under the U.S. Constitution's 8th Amendment, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, the UN Convention Against Torture, the Nelson Mandela Rules, the Bangkok Rules, and other international standards. Yet public reporting in Georgia has long reported that our state's prisons and jails fail to protect individuals under their care, including pregnant and postpartum women here in Georgia. Last month at our first public hearing, we heard from a Georgia woman who testified that just days after giving birth, she endured 3 weeks of solitary confinement in Georgia's prison system without medical help or access to her infant. We also made public our finding that while 41 U.S. states reportedly have laws that prohibit or restrict the shackling of pregnant women, the subcommittee identified apparent violations in at least 16 of those states, including the state of Georgia. Throughout its investigation, the subcommittee has received reports from formerly incarcerated mothers in Georgia that they faced life-threatening medical neglect and mistreatment while in prison. We heard from Georgians whose C-section sites became infected after their requests for antibiotics went unanswered. And one of these women reported that prison staff refused to take her to the hospital until she became septic. Our investigation continues today with our second public hearing, held here in Georgia, this time focused on conditions inside Georgia's prisons and jails for pregnant and postpartum women. The subcommittee will hear from a witness who will testify that she endured appalling conditions while pregnant and giving birth at Georgia's Clayton County Jail, including giving birth into her underwear after jail staff would not assist her and being placed in solitary confinement postpartum. Her son passed away less than a week after she gave birth. The subcommittee will also hear testimony from a doula and an advocate who can speak to the conditions faced by pregnant, incarcerated women in Georgia and whose organizations provide services for incarcerated pregnant and postpartum women throughout the state. This is an active and ongoing inquiry, and our subcommittee will continue to investigate human rights violations against pregnant and postpartum women in Georgia's prisons and jails and nationwide. Before we turn to our witnesses, I'd like to take a moment to thank Fulton County Chairman Pitts, the Fulton County government team, including Fran Phillips Calhoun and her staff, for facilitating our use of this facility today. And I'll now introduce our witnesses. Thank you again so much for joining us today. Ms. Tiana Hill is a mother of 3 and was pregnant and gave birth while incarcerated at Clayton County Jail in Jonesboro, Georgia. Ms. Tabitha Trammell is the founder of Women with a Plan, an organization providing doula services to women incarcerated at the Gwinnett County Jail in Lawrenceville, Georgia. Ms. Dominique Grant is the campaigns and operations manager at Women on the Rise, an organization focused on issues concerning women behind bars in Georgia. Before opening statements, we'll swear in the witnesses. I'll remind you that you're under oath testifying before the United States Senate. If you would all please rise and raise your right hands. Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give before the subcommittee is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes.
Let the record reflect that all witnesses answered in the affirmative. You may take your seats, please. We will now hear opening statements from our witnesses. We'll begin with Ms. Hill.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Hi, my name is Tiana Hill. I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, and I'm a mother of 3 beautiful girls. I was incarcerated at Clayton County Jail for about 7 months. I didn't know what was about to happen to me. When I entered the jail, I already knew that I was pregnant from a positive home test result, and I informed the jail staff at intake. I was taken to intake to take a pregnancy test. After taking that test, the jail staff congratulated me and said that I was not pregnant. Even so, towards the end of the first month at jail, I was still missing my cycle. I took another pregnancy test, but at this time, the judge staff would not tell me the results. I started telling my other cellmates, that I was pregnant. The safety and protection of my baby was important to me and my main concern.
Ms. Hill, may I suggest that you move the microphone a little bit
closer? Okay. About 50 times, I told the jail staff I was pregnant. Although I asked again and again for a pregnancy test and medical care from the jail staff, I was ignored from October until November. This time felt infinite and long. In November, a member of the jail staff finally asked me if I was pregnant, and I responded saying that I believed so because I had not had my cycle since I was incarcerated. No jail staff ever addressed my concern. Around the end of December, I went into early labor from the night of December 29th to December 30th, 2019. I started peeing blood. Immediately, I asked the jail staff officer, who I believe was a lieutenant, if he could take me to medical care. But he just called more staff instead. When they arrived at my cell, the jail staff supposedly checked my records in the jail system and said, "Ma'am, you're not pregnant." They told me that all 4 other tests on file to date confirmed that I was not pregnant. I started crying. I knew I wasn't crazy and that I was pregnant. I could feel my baby moving. My cellmate had seen the baby move. The jail staff, they could not do anything, so they left me in my cell. The pain was unbearable. I knew I was in labor. I'm sorry. My cellmate was panicking because she also knew and started saying, "I do not know how to deliver a baby. I don't know what to do." She was hysterical, crying and banging on the door. My cellmate was panicking.
Take all the time you need,
She was panicking, pressing the button. I was screaming in pain, trying to keep my baby in, and that was when the jail officer heard and finally took me upstairs to the jail infirmary. They made me take a 5th pregnancy test at the jail infirmary. They gave me a cup to pee in. The cup was full of nothing but blood. The test showed positive. They showed it to me at this time. The jail staff made me take a blood test to see if I was pregnant. This test showed that I was pregnant. Also, the jail staff on duty said, "You're pregnant. How long have you been here?" And I said, since September. The jail staff called the other lady to check for the baby's heartbeat. Meanwhile, I was bleeding all down my leg. I was so stressed. They wanted to see if the baby had a heartbeat because I was bleeding so much. Nobody knew if I was having a miscarriage or not. The officer, jail staff, and the ultrasound tech all heard my baby's heartbeat. They were in so much in disbelief that they kept checking to see if there was really a baby. I just kept saying, "I need to go to the hospital. I don't know why you guys are doubting me. I just took 2 tests. Can you please take me to the hospital?" I was obviously in labor, and they still didn't believe me. The jail staff started making jokes about my size, my weight, saying, "How could anyone think I'm pregnant?" It was humiliating. And instead of taking me to the doctor, they held me in the jail. I had to lay on a hard metal bed while going through labor pain. While I lay in the jail infirmary, I felt the tip of my baby's head coming out. The jail infirmary staff came in. He just watched me looking at me in my underwear and just told me not to push the baby, but my baby kept coming. There were male inmates freely passing by, just watching me writhe in pain and scream as I was having my baby. It was like the people were looking at a concert almost. They were just standing at the door looking, and I'm stuck naked with my legs wide open. I felt faint, like I was going to pass out, but I could see all these people around me. My baby was born premature in my panties. The lead jail infirmary staff looked at my panties and started to panic. The jail staff told me nothing. Wrapped my baby in my dirty sheets and left. Paramedics eventually came and got me and took me to the hospital. My baby was in the NICU. They allowed me to see him, but I was handcuffed to a wheelchair. I felt like that I was wrong. I did not like that, and it wasn't necessary at all. That was it. That was all the time that I had with my son. They took me back to the jail 2 days later. I wasn't allowed to call my family that day or have my mom to come visit the baby at the hospital. They put me back in general population the next day, then without any explanation told me I was being moved to suicide watch. I was so sad about this. I was actually feeling a little bit better because my sister was incarcerated with me, and it was helpful to see some family. The jail wouldn't give me any information about my baby once I left the hospital. For the first 4 days of his life, he was okay. I was able to call the doctor, but then on the 5th day of his life, my birthday, the mental health unit at the jail suddenly told me that my baby passed away. They wouldn't give me any information as how it happened. I didn't know. I still don't know, and I don't know where my son's remains are. And instead of giving me mental health support, the jail just put me into solitary on suicide watch. This shouldn't happen to any mothers. Ever since I arrived at that jail, no one listened to me. They didn't care, and they did not care about my baby. The jail just assumed if I'm there, I'm not a good person. No woman who is pregnant should have to go through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hill, for your testimony. Ms. Trammell?
Good morning, Senator Ossoff and the Subcommittee on Human Rights. Thank you for hearing my testimony today and for making me feel that my voice is important. My name is Tabitha Trammell. I was born and raised in the city of Atlanta. I'm the founder of Woman with a Plan, a nonprofit organization that serves incarcerated women and girls. These women and girls are referred to our organization, and they are primarily incarcerated in Gwinnett County Jail. Much of our work entails full spectrum doula services. A doula is a person who is who has non-medical training, but is present throughout the pregnancy and birth to support clients and advocate for their needs. Each year, Woman with a Plan usually serves between 300 to 350 women and girls with supplies, doula services, and referrals. This organization was birthed from my own lived experience in jail and in prison while pregnant 40 years ago. Throughout my pregnancy, I was in so much pain. I was always hungry because the jail and prison staff would never give me enough food. The guards took out their frustration on us if we asked about the times that the snacks should be given out or if the food was delayed, and it was often delayed, which is torture when you're eating for two. If those of us who were pregnant didn't act a certain way, we were also punished. I was threatened with solitary confinement if I complained about being in pain or needing to see a doctor. I was placed in solitary confinement repeatedly. I estimate 150 times, mostly when I was in my postpartum recovery. In solitary, I felt extremely depressed and suicidal because my body was changing. So I just cried, and I was always feeling hopeless. I was unaware that I had postpartum depression and wasn't screened for it. I cried and I kept ringing the buzzer for medical help, but that only delayed my food and delayed me getting period products. Unfortunately, I've been working with incarcerated women and girls at the Gwinnett County Jail and other jails for the past 6 years, and they are still having the same exact issues that I experienced. The women and girls I work with tell me all the time how no one responds when they are feeling nauseated. When they ask for medicines that can stop the nausea, no one brings them anything. Some of the ladies will call and tell me how they are in pain from hunger. Many of these women have no support outside the jail, and since commissary items cost money, they can't afford to buy snacks. Woman with a Plan helps educate these women on how to use commissary items to form a healthy diet for pregnancy and serves as a liaison between the women and the jail staff to get them enough food, but it isn't enough. They are also supposed to receive supplemental nutrition. While the jail has a system where they give snacks in between meals for pregnant women, the food is usually late, expired, or doesn't come at all. And if the women say anything about it or write a grievance, the staff will retaliate by placing them in solitary confinement. Sorry. The jail staff's attitudes toward pregnant women are sometimes hostile. The pregnant and postpartum women fear retaliation. When the women file a complaint, the staff treats you very differently. They try to make outcasts of women who complain. For example, I have seen the staff tell the other pregnant women and authorities at the jail, she's always making trouble, when in reality, a woman simply asks for extra blankets because she's cold. A lot of pregnant women are anemic. The staff simply doesn't care. They don't have capacity for your needs and don't want pregnant women to ask for even basic needs. Additionally, the postpartum period is extremely challenging for women who are incarcerated. I have been in contact with Gwinnett County Jail and other jails throughout the state of Georgia, and I have never witnessed an incarcerated woman being able to have direct contact with her child after she's given birth. Although Women with a Plan advocates on behalf of these women to the jail staff and volunteers and other authority figures to assure women get the medical care and humane treatment they deserve, they still may not get what they need. The women do not receive enough prenatal care, and their medical conditions are not monitored throughout pregnancy. Many of the women are diabetic and have been diagnosed with preeclampsia, but do not get doctor's appointments. Sometimes women do not even receive toilet tissue, soap, deodorant, or even toothbrushes. When they ask for these things, the staff do not want to be bothered. The women have to wait till a certain staff member who is empathetic comes on duty to get these things for them because the women are ignored or retaliated against. To ensure justice, my final call to action will be that standards are changed to the fact that the prisons are more humanized and the ladies are treated with respect and dignity. Staff in prisons and jails need to see that these women are humans. Officers should receive sensitivity training so they can know how to relate to different cultures of incarcerated, pregnant, and postpartum women, as well as all incarcerated women. They need to see and compassionately respond to signs of postpartum depression and mental illness. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell. Ms. Grant.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Dominique Grant, the Campaign and Operations Manager for Women on the Rise, Georgia. Women on the Rise is a membership-based organization led by Black women who are impacted by the legal system. We work closely with women inside of jails and prisons throughout the state of Georgia, including pregnant and postpartum women. Our purpose is to bring about changes to the way the legal system sees and treats women inside prisons and jails. My journey into this work began with my personal experiences. My father's repeated incarceration and my mother's determination to change a system that punishes mental health and substance use disorders. Interning at the White House with the Obama administration solidified my goal to be on the ground, actively working within the community to affect change. On this topic specifically, I have had my own traumatic birth experience in a local hospital, which inspired me to work toward getting my doula certification. We are here today to talk about the issue of how pregnant women are treated within Georgia's prisons and jails. Women on the Rise connects with incarcerated women at Lee Arundel State Prison, Fulton County Jail, and Atlanta City Detention Center. Our organization, including its leadership, has observed firsthand the poor treatment of women during their pregnancy and afterward. Incarcerated pregnant women in Georgia's prisons and jails are continuously ignored. For instance, one woman suffered from preeclampsia, which is extremely high blood pressure that could cause harm to the mom or baby. She had awful headaches and swollen feet, yet prison staff told her that she just wanted attention. By the time someone decided to listen, her situation had worsened and she needed emergency medical care. These women are treated as though they were not human, and incarcerated pregnant women across Georgia are treated this way. Overall, while pregnant, women do not get the required diet to sustain a healthy pregnancy. The Prison Law Office found that pregnant or recently pregnant women universally reported receiving inadequate nutrition during their pregnancies. The pregnant and incarcerated women we work with tell us all the time that their diets lack fruit and vegetables, and the only additional food they received was an extra snack of bread and a carton of milk per day, which sometimes was spoiled. The lack of The lack of access to real food and nutrition worsened their conditions, like preeclampsia and gestational diabetes. Many women also do not have the support from home to receive funds to buy extra food from commissary. Therefore, a lot of women go hungry, and the quality of that food and the quality of the food that is being offered at the prison is not a balanced diet to accommodate a growing fetus. And after giving birth, women often return to prison knowing that their babies need additional medical procedures or treatment due to being born premature or malnourished, but they were not allowed to be there to support their children. Not only are women ignored during pregnancy, prison guards also ignore them while they are in labor. When women go into labor, officers would ignore the women inside the prison, and many would have to go through extreme measures to get their attention and to get officers to allow them to go to the infirmary, as we've heard before. We once worked with an incarcerated woman who was in labor during a lockdown, and the guards ignored her yells for help. Eventually, everyone began to yell for help, and it took 3 hours for a guard to come and get her. Even while in active labor, the guards did not believe she was having a baby because her water did not break. She was then transported to Atlanta Medical Center, where she was handcuffed to the bed until it was time to push for her delivery. Because she was incarcerated, she was not believed or treated in a humane way. When these women give birth inside the prison or at a hospital, they are alone or with strangers during a very vulnerable time. After giving birth, a new mother has a few hours to bond with their child, but how long she has depends on the guard's attitude. Then she must turn her newborn baby over to her family, or most of the time to foster care. Once the child is taken away, the mother waits to be taken back to the prison, typically up to 2 days. While she waits, she is often handcuffed to the bed. This happens for most women that we work with. The lack of bonding time creates a wedge between a mother and child, and many studies have shown that the bonding time is crucial in the first few months of pregnancy. When returned to prison, the new mothers are depressed and despondent due to just giving birth and having to turn over their child. They are never screened for postpartum depression. Women have been put in solitary confinement if they have had to have a C-section, while other women have been placed back into general population where they are vulnerable to conflicts or even physical fights that could be fatal. Not only do they endure the mental anguish, but the physical pains of giving birth, but they are barely provided with Tylenol for the pain. Prison staff will give them a handful of pads, but don't provide any others after that. Women have had to make pads out of tissues and sheets to help themselves and others through. Reunification for these women and their children is also extremely difficult. A baby cannot transport itself to a hospital and coordination with the current caregiver for visits can be difficult. The facilities also do not have areas that are family and child friendly. Along with the basic challenges of reentry, like finding housing and employment, mothers are either forced to fight for custody to get their children back or put in positions where their child is given back to them immediately and they do not have the resources. Part of the work we do at Women on the Rise Georgia is ensuring that mothers are stable through employment, supportive services, and a sisterhood to make healthy mothers. We all know that pregnant women require special care during and after pregnancy. We ask that we start to recognize incarcerated women as human. These women are mothers, daughters, sisters, aunts, and even grandmothers. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Grant, Ms. Trammell, Ms. Hill, for your testimony. And Ms. Hill, I want to revisit and ensure we can clarify for the public and for the record precisely what you endured. And I want to thank you again for sharing such deeply personal and difficult testimony with the Senate and with the public. Did I hear you correctly that you gave birth into your underwear after jail staff refused to help you?
Yes, that is correct. That was one of the worst situations ever, experiences that ever happened to me. And I won't even call it experience because it was nothing good about it. being in that bed, I want to say first, being there and being ignored, and no one caring about the concern that I had. And I knew what I was dealing with. Being in that bed was just scary. I had to think about my life, my kids at home, because I didn't have any control in that situation. I didn't know how I would be able to save my baby. And I did not know, I do want to clarify, I didn't even know that I was having a boy because I wasn't monitored. I wasn't, never took to the doctor. Nobody checked this ultrasounds or nothing. It was one of the most scariest moments of my life.
And I'd like to ask our technical staff if we could just to raise Ms. Hill's microphone for her comfort so she doesn't have to continue to raise it manually. So we'll take a moment to allow that. Is Mr. Schwartz available? Oh. Pardon the interruption, Ms. Hill. And Ms. Hill, did I understand that mere days after you gave birth, and shortly after being taken back to the jail, you were placed on suicide watch without access to your infant? Can you describe that experience to us?
Yes. So I was just having, it was just like a regular day, and I was called out of my room for I don't know what reason it was, and told that I may need to go to suicide watch and that they would have someone to come and talk to me. No one came and talked to me, but they did put me in suicide watch. I was there left by myself for 24 hours. I was supposed to have an hour of time to come out and, call my family or whatever may needed to be done. I never was given that. I was put in that room and forced to listen to people screaming, banging on the wall, being denied any type of pain medicine as far as my, the pain that I was going through after birth. I wasn't given no pads or nothing, any of that. I had to use tissue. And I was just put in that room. Nobody came. I would press the button constantly, and they would tell me somebody's coming. Or somebody would come to the mic frustrated and would tell me to leave the button alone, stop pressing that button. I told you somebody is coming. And I would tell them, I'm not here for punishment. I did nothing wrong. I have no reason to be in this room by myself. I was fed cold food. If I was fed late at that, I did not have access to be able to use my commissary or anything. They basically put me on lockdown for having a baby in their jail. And that's how I looked at it, like I was being punished for something that I had no control over.
So you were, as you put it, basically put on lockdown within days of having delivered your baby.
Yes.
And you had to deliver your baby in the jail, into your underwear, without any proper
No
healthcare
help.
support?
No help or nothing. I begged the staff, the jail staff, the lead medical staff, I begged him to help me. It was never, no one helped. They just looked at me and told me, I'm gonna need you to not push that baby. Don't push that baby out.
After having been told repeatedly throughout your pregnancy,
I told them multiple times, officers, lieutenants, everyone, most of my cellmates knew. People visibly see my stomach move. I was gaining weight over time. Some of the officers even asked, like, you eating a lot, ain't you? Like, because I was getting real big.
how many times were you told by the jail staff that you were not pregnant during the period when in fact you were?
I want to say over 10 times. I got to a point where I just stopped trying to tell them because I didn't want anything to happen to me. I didn't want to be punished for basically trying to get their attention and let them know what's going on with me. It came to a point where I had to figure out how to keep my baby safe on my own.
But having been repeatedly told that you were not pregnant when in fact you were and you knew you were,
Yes.
you would have been unable to receive the kind of care, prenatal care necessary for a healthy pregnancy, correct?
Yes, correct. They wouldn't, yeah, basically.
And your baby was born premature
Yes,
in the jail.
in the jail, in the infirmary, in the back of the jail, where they usually don't go back there. They send a lot of inmate workers to go back there and check on us, kind of look through the window, make sure nobody is on the floor or anything. I tried to press the call button even in that situation. No, they didn't come. I had someone in the room with me, and she was doing the same thing, telling them that this girl is finna have her baby.
And after having been told repeatedly that you were not pregnant during your pregnancy and giving birth in the jail into your underwear without proper support to a premature baby,
Yes.
your baby passed away.
Yes, on my birthday, to be exact.
And I revisit that difficult fact, Ms. Hill, to remind those in attendance and the public that the neglect and inhumanity and medical mistreatment of pregnant women behind bars impacts the life, health, and safety of the pregnant woman and the newborn. Ms. Hill, I'm so sorry for your loss and your family's loss and the trauma that you endured through this experience. How has it impacted your family?
Well, I do want to say, as far as me, I'm still dealing with it today. I've been doing therapy for the last 4 years. Trying to cope with my mental health. As far as my family, we have to relive this every year on my birthday. I remember having a conversation with my mom on the phone, and we just cried while I was there, and we just cried because I had no control. I couldn't see my 2 daughters. I didn't even know how to explain that to my kids. And to this day, they still remember their brother, and they talk about him. And I have to hide my feelings. I have to keep it intact for them and stay strong. But this has brought something real, real bad on my family and me also. just, I'm sorry. The way they just didn't care and how they treated me. And I know my mom, for one, is hurt to know that her daughter and her grandson had to deal with this. And she don't have a grandson today, and I don't have a son, and my daughters don't have a brother because they didn't do everything that they could, and they didn't listen to me. This is something that I can't get over. And it's hard. It's hard to live with this every day because I don't have any closure. I don't know where my son remains is or how he passed away. This is the worst situation that's ever happened to me. And I have to keep repeating that because I feel it in my heart. I feel it every day that someone has control to take something that I made. That was my baby. And he's not here. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Well, Ms. Hill, there are, as you well know, women in counties across the state of Georgia right now, women in state prisons across the state of Georgia, women in prisons and jails across the United States who are enduring trauma and mistreatment. And your testimony today, and the fact that despite all that you have been through, you have the courage and the will to make a change in our system, to come and tell your story in public like this, to testify to what you went through. For all those who are here and for the thousands and thousands who are watching right now across the state and across the nation, I think is a testimony to your character and your courage.
Thank you.
Ms. Trammell, thank you for being here today. You testified about the traumatic experience you endured giving birth in prison in Georgia many years ago. You described it as an experience so impactful, so scarring, that it inspired you to devote your life to working on issues related to pregnancy in prison. You testified that after you gave birth, prison staff repeatedly placed you again in solitary confinement without access to mental health support or to period products. Can you describe that experience?
Yes, Senator. First, I want to make a statement that when this was going on with me, I felt that I didn't deserve any better because I was already incarcerated. So however they treat me, that was what I deserved. So I went through years feeling, I was hurt about it, but then I said, you didn't deserve no better. You was incarcerated because I didn't know any better. But as time went on, and I'm working with different ladies in different prisons and jails, my pregnancy was 40 years ago. And here it is, 40 years later, it's still the same treatment. And as I go through it, I'm looking at, they're going through the same things with the period products. If you keep asking for something, not only do the jail staff retaliate towards you, they tell the other cellmates, oh, she's a problem, we're not gonna cut on the TV because, just say Trammell kept ringing the buzzer. And then you got not only the negative attitudes from the staff, your cellmates are being negative and rude to you, so it's really a scary situation. And at that time, I had access to no period products as I revisit this again. And I kept ringing the door because at that particular time, I had just had a baby 3 days ago. I was having very heavy blood clots, had to tear up a towel in my room. A lady was in there with me. She had an extra towel because she had been in there longer than me. So she had accumulated a little extra stuff. That's how you do when you're in survival mode. You hide little towels and stuff. That's in our homes, that's a commodity to us, but that's survival in prison or jail to have an extra towel. And so she said, you know, you can use this. So we tore it up or whatever. And that held me to, you know, somebody you can get on staff. Some of the staff are a little bit more loving than the others. So you have to try to wait till the right person is on to get what you need. So it was very embarrassing because here I am, done bled all through my clothes. You got to walk up to the front, everybody looking at you. It was just re-traumatizing all over as I sit here today. It's just thinking of humiliation and what I went through. And then as I think back, when you get the follow pass, if that, they hardly don't even want to issue you a fresh washcloth because you got to go in there and take a shower. And then they'll say, well, the shower is not going to be available till 6 p.m. It's 4 o'clock. I got to sit here my own body fluids that long. So it's really traumatizing for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell. Could you move the microphone a little closer, please? And Ms. Hill testified that she was never screened for postpartum depression during her time at Clayton County Jail in 2019. You testified, I believe, that you also were not screened for postpartum depression when you were incarcerated, correct?
Yes, I testified that I was never screened, and I had all the symptoms. I constantly cried. I had the mood swings. I couldn't sleep at night, and I was constantly telling the staff, asking, can I go to medical, because I couldn't get to sleep. And then one minute I kind of get within myself to adapt to the situation, and then the next minute I'm crying uncontrollably. So they didn't even look at the symptoms or even try to get me to somebody to see why was I going through these different changes. I didn't understand what was going on with me at the time.
And for members of the public asking, okay, well, we're hearing about events further into the past. Mm-hmm. Well, not only does it explain your motivation to do the work that you do,
absolutely,
Ms. Trammell, it also is evidence that little or nothing has changed in decades and that the mistreatment continues, correct?
Absolutely.
You testified that the pregnant and postpartum women you serve today at the Gwinnett County Jail face retaliation for voicing their needs, including solitary confinement. What is your reaction when you hear from those women who report that kind of retaliation? You hear from Ms. Hill, who, as she described it, was placed on lockdown, postpartum.
What I hear, what I feel, that we have a system that has failed us. I feel that it's been done so long, it's a norm, that it's unaddressed, and so it makes it okay. That's how I feel about it. Because like I told you early in the testimony, I have some ladies call in, and the same things I was going through 40 years ago, you know, things supposed to progress. Those areas are not being addressed, for as giving them their snacks on time. If they want extra juice or whatever, they be penalized for asking. If you ask too many times, if you ring the buzzer too many times, because it irritates them, you know. And then some of them say to the effect, like I say, I thought it was my fault. And one instance I said, oh, I'm so hungry. She said, but this ain't the Ritz-Carlton. You know, made statements like that. That's why I carried the stigma and the pain a long time. This, what I'm going through and testifying today, I snuffed this for many years. I'm in therapy now for my trauma because I thought the way I was treated, I deserved it because I was incarcerated.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell. Ms. Hill, you testified and we've reviewed that you were told repeatedly you were not pregnant, despite the jail staff having you take multiple pregnancy tests during your time there, including 2 while you were in labor. You were made to take 2 pregnancy tests while you were in labor, correct?
Yes, I was.
You testified that you were bleeding when you took your 5th pregnancy test and that you could only produce blood into the test cup, correct?
Yes.
But the jail staff still would not take you to a hospital, is that right?
Yes, that's correct.
Did you feel at that moment that your life, your health, your safety were in danger?
Yes, I did. I did. I felt like my life was in danger at that point. I knew before that they didn't care about me being pregnant. So my son's life was already at jeopardy. I was trying to figure out how can I fix it. But at that moment, I felt like I couldn't do anything. I couldn't even walk, and I was made to get up to take another test. I couldn't walk, visibly could not walk. It was inmates also in the infirmary, in cages, begging to help me. Can I help her? No, you gotta stay in there. They was also saying, y'all need to take her to the hospital. I was bleeding so much. It was blood trails through the infirmary. Of me sitting in the wheelchair, it was coming from the bottom of the wheelchair. It was so much blood. And I was still told, I need you to go in that bathroom and take another test. And I was rushed. Hurry up, you're taking too long. What's taking you so long?
And you were not taken to the hospital?
No, I was not taken to the hospital. I was put in a room with an IV in my arm and told to stay here until in the morning when the lead jail medical staff come.
Ms. Grant, thank you for your testimony today. On July 31st, this subcommittee heard at a hearing in the United States Capitol from Dr. Carolyn Sufrin that when jails and prisons don't have qualified health providers available on site, custody officers who lack medical training must decide whether pregnant women need emergency medical attention. You testified, heard powerfully testimony to a similar issue from Ms. Hill today. How does not being believed by the staff affect the health and safety of incarcerated pregnant women?
Thank you for that question. I do want to start by saying, too, the woman, they were aware that she was pregnant, but they denied the fact that she was in labor. And this is something that has happened to me while not incarcerated. So you can only imagine what that would do to someone that is incarcerated and in shackles and caged. Ultimately, not being believed allows for further, and I mean, I feel so bad for reiterating, but we heard Tiana's story. When you are not believed, you are in danger, the mother is in danger, the child is in danger. There are so many things that can happen during labor. A baby can have an umbilical cord wrapped around their neck, and because you aren't believed in that moment, that very time-sensitive issue is now prolonging. There's so many situations that can happen from women not being believed, but I believe one of the biggest ones are the fact that a mother can die and a baby can die. And because these are very time-sensitive issues, you cannot determine when your baby is coming. It's almost impossible. You can't stop your baby from coming. And if someone doesn't believe that you're actively in labor, then you aren't going to receive that care, and the safety of your child is in danger, and the safety of yourself as well.
Ms. Trammell, you testified that jail staff may say pregnant women are, quote, just making trouble when they ask for help. Ms. Grant, you testified that in your experience, based upon women that you've helped, guards have ignored a woman's yells for help when she went into labor, or said that a pregnant woman with preeclampsia, quote, just wanted attention when she complained about her symptoms. beginning with you, please, Ms. Grant, and then we'll turn to Ms. Trammell. How would each of you describe the prevailing attitudes of staff in these facilities toward pregnant and incarcerated women?
Yes. So just to clarify, we do work with these women in these facilities, but I also want to shed light to the fact that our staff have had direct contact with these women. Our leadership has served time incarcerated with these women as well. Not only do we hear the stories from the outside, a lot of these testimonies came directly from inside when they experienced their incarceration. To that point, ultimately, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? I just want to make sure I'm
How would you
answering it.
characterize, based upon what the work your organization has done, the prevailing attitudes of non-medical correction staff in these facilities toward pregnant and postpartum women?
Got you. So attitudes in general towards people that are incarcerated is that they deserve whatever mistreatment they receive. Typically, from the stories that we've heard, correction staff are normally annoyed, irritated, bothered by the fact that there are women that need extra attention. A lot of times, the staff will make the other incarcerated women responsible for caring for these women. So typically, they don't want to be bothered. And it forces everyone else to have to be involved to find ways for them to get the officer's attention, to find ways to help that woman that is going through that experience.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Ms. Trammell, could you share your view on that, please?
I share the same view as Dominique. A lot of the ladies call and tell me how when they talk to staff, they are very negative. And they always voice the staff that we're understaffed, it's just me. It's only one person can do this, and they're just irritated. And you got to mind you, they're operating out of a space of not knowing, because a lot of those people, the staff don't have medical training. So they operate out of a space, they don't even know what they're doing. So rather than to even try to find help or get the ladies to the right person, which would be medical, they just shut them down and ignore it.
Thank you, Ms. Trammell. I thought we heard some powerful testimony from Ms. Grant about the importance of bonding. And Ms. Hill, you testified that before your child died, you had only one visit with him in the NICU, correct?
Yes, I did.
The hearing we held on July 31st, we heard from Ms. Jessica Umberger, who testified that after giving birth in the state of Georgia, she had just 2 hours to hold her infant, didn't see her child again, who survived, thank God, but didn't see her child again for 3 years. Ms. Trammell, do the women you serve and work with have experiences like Ms. Umberger's, like Ms. Hill's, in terms of access to their infant?
Yes, they have the same experience. A lot of times, well, most of the women I serve, they don't have family support, so that's the norm. And if they do have family support, the family have a certain amount of time to get to the child for as with family services, so they can take over the temporary placement until the mother come home, whatever her case plan is. But yeah, it's no time for bonding at all.
And Ms. Trammell, in the event that there's no family available, which you testified in your experience is common, typically that baby winds up headed toward the foster care system?
Yes. And the head to the foster care system is not no support services. The staff, like if you want to go, the lady is already in postpartum and the baby's been taken, they don't offer any information how you can follow up or get, like a liaison to see where the baby is at. And that's another, a lot of my clients have called and told me that, asked me, where do they start at? Because the staff won't even be cooperative. And try to give them some advice of where, who is the adoption person or whatever to locate the infant. So that's a lot of stress on the mother too, going through the postpartum, the not knowing, they don't recognize their voice or respect them, want to know where their child at. And one lady told me, said the guard even went to the fact, said, you'll have your child if you went in here. So, and that traumatized me too, like going back to my own personal situation.
And if that baby is headed toward DFACS, and this subcommittee has intensively investigated the record and conduct of DFACS in the state of Georgia, we found that conditions for children in DFACS may mirror conditions of detention or incarceration in a group home, that there's been very significant sex trafficking of children from the DFACS system, that DFACS officials in the state of Georgia, according to the sworn testimony at a hearing like this one of multiple juvenile judges, suggested placing foster children in juvenile detention, in jails for children, because of a lack of placements in the system. So here we have a life beginning where prenatal care has been denied, conditions of birth may be life-threatening, no opportunity for infant to bond with mother, and then child headed into a system that we know has a record of neglect, the imposition of trauma, abuse, and worse. What kind of impact does that have on that child's prospects?
It limits the child's prospects, and it tears down a whole generation, because it's starting off with the mother, how she was treated, and then it's all, how can I say it, it's abandonment. So when it speeded up to the child, it don't give them room to flourish positively, because it's all that neglect, abuse. We've been getting a lot of reports about how those group homes and the treatment in the group homes and stuff, and it's just a lot. It was just me to think about how you put it in that timeline, how it just diminishes the child. Really don't have a chance from birth on.
And likely has a much higher prospect themselves of
Recidivism.
encounter with criminal justice system,
Absolutely.
incarceration, and so the cycle
Continues. Yes, I agree with that.
Ms. Grant, based upon your organization's experience, can you shed some light on the impact of this denial of bonding time between mother and infant?
Absolutely. We've gotten a chance to see firsthand the trauma that it leaves the child with and the mom with. A lot of times, if they don't have the opportunity to bond with them as soon as they're born, or they're not seeing them until a couple of years later, the mother is re-traumatized, because now she's going through the process of understanding that her child doesn't even know her. Along with that, they are also in the process of trying to build themselves up to be able to provide for their child. And that could break down the bonding process as well. We would hope that all women come out to housing, employment, and the necessary things to be able to get their child right away. But unfortunately, that isn't an option, and not allowing the child to bond, as it was mentioned earlier, does typically lead to children being involved in our criminal justice system. And also a lot of times reincarceration of mothers for finding ways to survive or finding ways to be able to get their child.
Thank you, Ms. Grant. Ms. Hill, I'd like to offer you the last word here and just invite you to share anything additional based on your experience that you'd like to share, and respectfully ask you to tell the public why you chose to take this step today to share your story with the world.
Okay. I want to say thank you for having me and being able to tell my story. This is something that I've been wanting to do for 4 years now. And since I left that jail, I want to start off by saying the way that we were treated in that jail, the women and me specifically being ignored, not being able to make sure that my baby was okay and that I could bring him home. That's just one of the worst things that somebody can go through. Giving life is one of the best things to be able to do. So for someone to have control over that and take that from you, it's something that you have to live with for the rest of your life. And I also want to say, I believe that they do need some type of sensitivity training of such, because I was there and there was times where we didn't have running water. I was put in a room where we had toilets full of feces. Women were on their periods, bleeding, blood in the toilet. We could not come out. We couldn't shower. It was one time where we had to go back to our cells, and I was always placed on the top tier, upstairs. So my whole time throughout my pregnancy, I was constantly going upstairs, up and downstairs. I got very fainted, and I could not make it up the steps. The officer came to me. It's like, you need to get up. You need to go upstairs. Hurry up. Like, was threatening me, basically saying that they would call someone to help me get up those steps. And that was one of the times where I let the officer know I'm pregnant, and they don't believe me. I need some water. I need something, because I feel like I'm finna pass out. Something could happen to me right now. I could have fell down the steps. Anything could have happened at that moment. So my safety it didn't matter to them. So yes, I do feel like they need to be trained for that. And they need to have people who care and people who know about medical care when it comes to pregnant women. And I also want to say, and this is on behalf of me, my lawyer, and my therapist, and my family, thank you again for having me. And I will continue to keep doing this until this is over, because I could have died, and I wouldn't have been able to be here to tell my story. And in that unfortunate situation, I don't have my son here today. And I have to live with that. And I feel like somebody needs to be punished, not me. I shouldn't be the only one left with this feeling. Somebody else needs to be punished. Something needs to happen. And I said, thank you. Thank you.
No thanks are due to me, Ms. Hill. Thank you for sharing your story. And I was reminded while you were speaking of something that Ms. Umberger said at our hearing on July 31st. She described how, as she was laying in a caged room in the basement of a hospital after undergoing a C-section, which she testified was against her will, and having had just a couple hours with her infant. This is before being taken back and thrown in solitary confinement within days of delivering, that she was just asking herself, does anyone even know that this is how we're being treated, and does anybody care? And when you come forward and you tell your story to the United States Senate, to the state, to the nation, we're working to ensure that people know what's happening. And I believe that your powerful testimony will make people care.
And can I add to that?
Sure.
I want to add to that also. When I was able to see my son, I was shackled to a wheelchair and I was taken to the NICU. I was only given 15 minutes. And I could barely see my son because I could not stand up. He was in an incubator. I could not see my baby. I still don't know what my baby looked like. And that is something I have to live with, to not even have the memory of his face. So yes, that is one of the main things that I did want to say too. This is why I still cry to this day, like it happened yesterday. Because I don't know what he looks like. I was never able to touch him. He was wrapped up immediately once he came out of me. Well, not immediately, but he was wrapped up. I was not able to see him, touch him, nothing. And I still live with that to this day, and that is one of the main reasons why it's hard for me every day. And mainly on my birthday, because that's how I celebrate my birthday. I give it to my kids. And thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Hill. The subcommittee sustains its focus on the humanitarian crisis behind bars in the state of Georgia and the United States because this is, in my view, the most extreme civil and human rights crisis unfolding in the United States today. And only by shedding light on it, calling attention to it, demanding and enacting change will it change. We have obligations at the federal, state, and local levels to treat this with the urgency that it merits, that human beings are enduring what is clearly, in my view, cruel and unusual punishment. And I just remind the public as we close that we're talking about pregnant women and their newborn infants. And I don't know what could be a more relevant measure of a society's humanity than how we treat pregnant women and newborn babies.
Yes.
So thank you all for your testimony today.
Thank you.
The second public hearing in this ongoing inquiry into jail and prison conditions faced by pregnant and postpartum women in Georgia and nationwide. The hearing record will remain open for 1 week for statements to be submitted into the record. Questions for the record may be submitted by senators until 5 p.m. on Wednesday, August 21st, and the hearing is adjourned.